Hi, my name is Richard Schmidt. I am on my last year at the Bachelor with Honors in Computing. I'm doing a specialization on Internet of Things, and my project is called Smart BinClean. So basically, Smart BinClean is an Internet of Things project with the focus of helping both the private and public sectors, such as offices, universities, city council, and so on. So to have a better insights about their waste management process by providing them with real-time readings of the levels of rubbish inside each of the bin container and displaying all those readings in a user-friendly web page where all the bins containers are properly labeled. You'd have the location, the ID, the level of the rubbish inside. It can help them, those companies, better plan out their collection routes, reduce some CO2. If you think about the Dublin City Council, where they need those trucks to go and collect the rubbish, if you are avoiding a route that's not necessary, you are saving CO2. Also saving on staff time, fuel, inventory, and thus helping the environment. It differentiates from existing applications by addressing it to a much wider market niche than the options currently available. To the best of my knowledge, based on all of the research carried out during the project since the first semester, the option available nowadays, they focus more on the public sector, which is pretty much like those bin containers we find in the main city centers. And Smart BinClean goal is to bring this technology to the private sector as well, such as offices. So if you have a huge office building with 35, 50, whatever, many of rooms, and you usually have staff going and check each of them, that would be helpful. Sometimes most of those bins, they are not full by the end of the day. So you can allocate those staff time to do something a little bit more useful with their time. Smart BinClean advantages are the relative low cost associated with its development, hence benefiting the companies with a low cost implementation, as well as easy staff training once the system has been developed with an ease of use set of mind approach. So it's easy to use. The standard users only need a few minutes of training in order to understand how the system works, and the admin needs just a few minutes more. It's not long. They would know how to use the system, and because we are using IoT technology, those components, most of them, they tend to be very cheap, so it's very low cost for the companies to implement them. Also, Smart BinClean proves pioneering into this market niche with potential to large market penetration. As to the best of my knowledge, there is no other product available in the market right now that focuses on all of those different market niches. Some of the disadvantages are finding fundings, as it's still a new idea and people tend to see the rubbish scenario only as a problem and not as an opportunity to create a new market around it. So I think that's something, even though it's a disadvantage, we can also get the advantage of it. So the technologies that I have used to implement it, they are Raspberry Pi model, Raspberry Pi 3 Model B Plus, a GrovePi, ultrasonic sensors. I have used Python as the language that we get all the readings from the sensors and send that to the PHP. I am also using HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript, as I mentioned, PHP as well, and MySQL as the database. As you can see here, we have a three-tier diagram of the system. You can see you'd have both the admin and the standard users. Once they log in, they can see all the bins in the system. You have the technology that we used for the front end in there. Then you go to the last tier where we have our server, our PHP. We have our hardware components in there. You can see how they interact with each other. Then we go to the data tier where we have all this information sent to our database where it's stored. So we can also update, add, delete some of the information. Regarding the test and evaluation of the system, it has been tested in different ways. The database has been tested in conjunction with the PHP by entering, deleting data and checking if it was performing as expected. If something that was not supposed to occur would be caught in the code, the PHP would display a warning message on the screen. It would allow me to see what's wrong, and so I could go and tweak it until it would work properly. It's also possible for the admin to check the readings on the web page that are being received on the web page, if they are checking against the Python code output on the terminal. So if you are into your Raspberry Pi and you get to the terminal, you see all the output, and you can actually double check that against what's being displayed on the web page. So you can see whether it's performing as it was supposed to or not. The system was evaluated by performing the aforementioned tests and updating the code once it would not pass its tests. An example was the logic on the Python code that was not incorrect. And after observing it working closely, the code has been updated until it would work properly by providing the desired output I wanted. The queries between the PHP code and the database have performed extremely well, as all of the queries are working correctly. I didn't have major problems with them. I had worked with PHP before. All the hardware is working properly as well. Once trying to implement it in the project, the setup and the process required have proved to be working correctly. So now I'll be going through the demo of the system. Right now I'm logged in as an admin. The admin have all those options here to add, delete, update things in the system, add a new user, delete new existing user. The standard user would only have one button here, that's to report a problem with a specific bin. You can see the menus in here for the empty, half we don't have any, full we don't have any, home page. You can see right now that both of the bins are empty. I'll start filling them up with some rubbish so we can see the levels of rubbish changing inside of them on the screen. You can see the web page is flashing a little bit. I am using a plugin on the browser to refresh the page automatically, just to make it a little bit quickly for the demo. You can see that bin number 2 is now showing up as half full. So if you go in here, you can see it. You can see the other one. Let's start cleaning up the other one as well. You can see that bin number 1 is also showing half at the moment. You can see that on bin number 2 right now, we have it set as full. Let's get the other one as full as well, just a second. You can see that bin number 1 is also full at the moment. So you can see you have both of them full. If you come to the empty, none, half, none, full, there they are. So the first thing we'll be going through is the Python code. This is the script where we'll be getting all the readings from the ultrasonic sensors and send them to our PHP file where we can update all the images for each of the bins container regarding their levels of rubbish inside of each of them. So one of the first things we got to do is we have create an empty array where we be storing the bins containers we have in our system. So here we set, first of all, we have the sizes. So let's say if you have only bins with 34 centimeters of height and another one with 60, so that's how we create that. So we set the sizes. If you have 3, 4 different sizes, then that's okay. We just set them in here. Then we start setting our first bin container array. So the first value we have here is the bin ID, so the ID for each of the bins. And this one here is the port number where we connect the ultrasonic sensor to our GrovePi. After that, what we do, we get the size we want for this. So for this particular bin, number 1, we have a size of 34, so we just extend size 1 to it. Once we're finished, we get this trash 1 array and we extend that to the trash array, which is this one here. Then we do the exactly same thing for the second trash, for the third one, and for the fourth one. You could only have 1 bin container here, 2, 3, whatever, as many as you need. So this is one of the most important parts of the code. This is the join function. Here we get 3 parameters: the distance, the trash ID, and the size. So in the first part of our if statement, what we do is we check if it's empty. So once it's empty, we use our request web query library. We use the get method and we send that to this PHP file. I'll be going through that later on. So here we'd update in our web page the container for a specific bin ID to be empty. If the ID is half full, we have the checking in here. We set the image to half. We update for that specific ID. The same for if the bin is full. So here it is. The way it works is we need to set the IP number of where the Raspberry Pi is set up in the network. I'm not showing my one here for security reasons, but of course I'll be running the demo. In the demo, you see it all working. Just here for security reasons, it's been hidden, of course. So once you do all those check-ins, you send the status to our PHP file. Then we have our while loop. Here we loop through our basically we'll loop through our array. We we call the function from the GrovePi library that converts all the measured signals into a readable distance measured in centimeters. Then we call the function in the Python program to judge all the bins and send the distance to measure the bin ID and the size. We sleep the function for 3 seconds to get more readings. Now let's go through this PHP file here so you see how it actually works. So in here, that's pretty much kind of that URL we have there. Here you get all the parameters to see what level of rush we're having, whether it's empty, half, or full. We get the parameters here, the ID, the image. We connect to our database. We open the connectivity between the PHP and the database. And basically what we do is we update it here. We update our real-time table. We set the image. So if for, let's say, ID 1, we get now it's empty, that's what the image will display on the page. If later on that particular bin is half or full, we get the ID for that bin, we will update our image, and that's what the user will see on the screen. So here on the index page I have used a template I found in here. I have the resource in here. You can check it later on. So here, basically, what we'll be doing is we are going to send the user to our login PHP to check if the credentials entered are correct or not. So once the user enters here his username and password, we send the user to the login PHP. We get the username and password parameters. We check if they have been inserted in the fields. Then we connect to our database. We query the database to see if that user actually exists or not. If the user doesn't exist, we throw an error down below in the code. Let's go through in here. So we check also if the password entered matches the one we have in the database. So if the user enters a wrong password, which will show an error message, so he can try it again. We basically start our session here. So if the user that logged in is an admin, which you have set as a true, then we redirect the user to the monitoring admin.php. If the user is just a standard user, then we send him to monitor PHP. Those are basically the home page for each type of user. Once you have that in, we have some error checks here. So if the password doesn't match in the database, so we throw an error. If the username doesn't exist in the database, throw another error. If the user didn't fill in one of the fields, we throw another error. And we have a JavaScript function here just to alert, to warn the user that the username or the password, or maybe even both of them, are not correctly inserted into the field. So we redirect them back to try to log in again. So this is the monitoring admin PHP. So here is basically where we have all those modals for those buttons where the admin can, in this case here, can add a new bin. So we have the button in here. We get the modal Bootstrap in here. We get all the parameters we need. Then we redirect all those parameters to this page here, the insert new bin .php. Let's check it out. So in here we get all those parameters filled in the modal form, the ID, the type, the location. Then we open the connectivity with between PHP and the database. And basically what we do in here is just use the insert int command from the MySQL into the real-time database. We insert the ID, the type, the location, the image. We set, for every new bin inserted in the system, we set the first image to be as empty, because there's no point in putting a half or full image there. If you're adding a new bin to the system, of course it will be empty. So then what we have here is just display the message, the new bin record successful recording the DB. We redirect the user back to his home page, and that's pretty much for this one here. Going back to the monitoring admin PHP, we go to the next button, which is the edit bin. Then we have the Bootstrap modal in here. We get all the parameters to edit the bin, as you can see. Then we redirect all those parameters to this page here, the update bin info from web admin.php, which we'll go through now. Here you get all those parameters in here. Then what we do is we select all from the real-time table. We check for that ID. So if you're updating, let's say, bin number 2, you just check for that bin ID, and then you update whatever of those parameters you want to update. Maybe you want to update the type of waste, maybe you want to update the location because it was wrong, or the bin have been changed its location. Once you've done that, you just pretty much just get a message saying that the bin with the ID number for that specific bin has been updated. Then redirect the user back to his home page. And here is where we have the update command. So here what we have is, here we just update the ID of the bin. So let's say maybe, I don't know, the admin entered the wrong ID for a specific bin. He wants to change that for some reason. He can just change the ID number. And here is where you update the location and the type of waste, so organic or general waste or whatever you want to update that to. Then you just get the message saying that the choosing ID being is now recorded in the database. Going back to our monitoring admin, now we have our delete button. This is to delete a bin from the system. So we get all those parameters we need again. Then we redirect the user to the delete from web admin.php. Here we get the parameters we need, which is the ID. Then we go to our MySQL query. Here we basically select all we have in our real-time table based on the ID we are entering. Once we found it, then what we do is we use our delete from command, which will delete that specific bin ID. So if you are trying to delete bin ID with the ID number 3, that it will do. Once you do that, you get the message saying that the bin with the specific ID has been successfully deleted. You redirect the user back to his home page. If the ID number doesn't exist, let's say you have only, I don't know, 10 bins in the system, and you try to enter ID number 15, then it will throw an error saying that the ID doesn't exist. Next, back to the monitoring admin. Now we are going to the solve a reported issue button. Here we have another Bootstrap modal. Then what we do is we send all that to our solve a reported issue from web admin.php. Here we get the parameter we are using, which is the ID. Then we select all of those from the our real-time table in our database. Once we find that specific ID, we basically delete the we deleted the reported problem for that specific bin ID. So if the standard user reported a problem for bin, let's say number 3, and the admin have solved that problem, he would just go there, he would go to that button, choose the model would open, and he would just select that the problem for the bin number 3 have been solved. it would go through here, it would update, and it would get the message saying here, issue at bin number 3 has been marked as being solved. Then we get back to the monitoring admin PHP. If you enter an ID that doesn't exist, you get an error message. If we don't fill out the modal form, we get another error message in here. Back to the monitoring admin PHP. What we have now is the delete existing user button. So in here is to delete a specific user, maybe a standard or admin user that no longer works for the company. So we get all the parameters we need. Then we send our query to the, delete user from the db.php, which go in here. So in here, we get the username and email parameters to delete the existing user. Then we go to our users table. We select all from there with that specific username and email. Then use our delete from command to delete that specific user and email from our database so that the user will be completely deleted. Then we get a message saying that the whatever user have been successfully deleted. If the username or the email doesn't exist, we throw an error in here so the admin can try to delete the user again. Now going back to our monitoring admin, here we'd have the bottom, you'd get the Bootstrap modal. We'd get all those parameters sent to our PHP file, to our registered user in DB PHP file, which is in here. So let's have a look. So in here, basically what we do is we take all those parameters that have been entered into our modal form, then connect to our database. We send that query to check all the users we have here in our users table. If there are no results back, which means that if there are no other users in our database with the same information, then we proceed to creating the new user in the system. So basically what we do is we are checking if all the fields have been completed. So that's what we do in here. We check, this is a base check to see if the email entered is valid or not. So of course, we need to have an @ symbol. We need to have a dot. So that's pretty much what we are doing here. So if you enter a wrong email format in the system that will not accept it, you throw in an error. So you need to do that again. So you check if the first and the second password you enter into our form, if they match. So if you've made a mistake and you entered the wrong password in one of the fields, in the password or in the retype password field, then it will throw an error and you can try again. Once everything is okay, what we do is use the insert int command. We send all those values to our table in our database, and then basically the new account for the new user has been created successfully. Once you are finished there, again, we just redirect our admin back to his monitoring admin.php page. Going back to the monitoring admin page, so in here is, as this is the home page for the admin, here is where he would see all the bins that are in the system. So if you have, I don't know, 30 bins in the system, he'll be seeing all of them there with their respective sizes of rubbish in each of them. So basically what we do here is we get all from the real-time table and you order them by the ID, and then we display them on the page for the user. Thank you. So now I will be going through the questions and answers. The first question is, discuss the most difficult aspect of your project with particular emphasis on those areas related to your choosing specialization. So the most difficult aspect of the project was to send the readings from the Raspberry Pi to the server and the web page I have created, as I have never done anything quite like that before. We had used some different types of technologies before, but nothing really close to what I was trying to achieve in here. And being able to achieve that was tricky, and there are lots of trial and error involved along the way. Having all the data received on the server side and properly displayed on the web page and changing the bins status accordingly was challenging as well. Getting the functions and the for statements on the Python that checks the levels of the rubbish inside each bin container was challenging as well, as I have experienced lots of errors and wrong readings throughout the implementation. But I was able to find a solution to all of those. The use of the GrovePi proved to be very challenging, as every other project I have found on my research use Arduino instead. So that increased difficulty on developing the system due to the lack of resources, as most of those resources are focused on the Arduino, and the implementation on the Arduino tends to be different than the one in the GrovePi. Question 2, discuss the most innovative aspect of your project, for example, with respect to your use of technologies, programming languages, or frameworks, etc. So the most innovative aspect of the Smart BinClean is the web application, where users can view the bins containers and also the CRUD functionality and a nice and user-friendly graphical interface. The Python script that gets all the readings for the sensor sent to the server side are also very innovative, as most of the projects found on my research on this top use Arduino language processing, which I've mentioned before. So those are kind of like the most innovative aspects of the project. Question number 3, with respect to your requirements specification, what requirements have you since added, removed, or changed, and what impact has this had on the completeness of your project? So even though challenging, all the requirements and specification set since the first semester have been implemented in the application. So I have not deleted any of them. Everything I set since semester 1, I have implemented in here. They all have been demonstrated here, and there are full details of them on the report submitted throughout year 4, where you can check it. So question number 4, describe in detail your approach to testing. So my approach to testing was by testing every new functionality that was implemented throughout the implementation of the Smart BinClean. For an example, as I mentioned before, it was like the judge function written in the Python code. I would test it by running the script and filling up the container bins and checking if the output was as expected. I found some errors, some logical problems in my programming with this test, which allowed me to review and tweak it until desired output has been achieved. It has been similar on testing the web page once it had been implemented. In regard to the CRUD functionality on the web page, all the forms have been extensively tested by adding, deleting, editing information, and check it against the database to see if the code was working properly, to see if the data was being added, deleted, or updated as it was supposed to. Question number 5. If you were to start your project again, would you change any of the decisions you made? For example, in relation to tools, technologies, languages, algorithms, testing, strategies, etc. So I would perhaps use Arduino instead of the GrovePi due to the lack of resources faced by the GrovePi community. I would also consider creating an Android app instead of a web page, as I think would be another challenging thing to achieve with it. and perhaps using maybe a different scripting language instead of using Python, maybe using the one that comes with the Arduino IDE called processing. That's it. Thank you, guys.